Severance's cinematography is absolutely stunning, and it's all thanks to a simple secret that everyone can apply in their own works. Each scene is framed in a way that draws your eye instantly to the subject and continues to maintain that focus as the camera moves. A lot of this is thanks to something many of you watching have probably heard of before: the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is the idea that if you split an image into thirds vertically and horizontally, then you'll end up with some grid lines and 9 separate sections. Then if you line up the subject of the frame along those grid lines, you'll generally end up with a much nicer composition.
I'm a digital media student, and right before season 2 of Severance started airing, we did a whole unit all about the rule of thirds. With this rule fresh in my mind, as I watched each new episode, I was honestly shocked at how consistently Severance uses the rule of thirds. It's not just as simple as lining things up with the grid lines and intersection points. It's really about using the rule in combination with other composition techniques to really make a scene pop. Let's jump into an example to better explain what I'm talking about. For my first example, I'd like to discuss the opening scene of Season 2, Episode 3.
The scene opens on a road surrounded by snow-covered fields. The viewer's eye is almost instantly drawn to Cobell's car that's parked on the side of the road. If we throw the grid lines over top of this scene, you can see that her car is right near the upper right intersection point of the grid lines. In the next shot, Cobell jolts awake as a truck shoots past her on the road. When she's fully upright, the middle of her head is right where the far left vertical grid line would be. Then in the following shot outside of her car, Cobell's driver's side window is right near the bottom right intersection point, and the center of her car is where the bottom horizontal grid line would be.
Even after just looking at these 3 shots, it's pretty easy to see how the rule of thirds was used to help construct them. Kind of. You see, I picked this scene in particular for my first example in order to talk about something that's pretty important. The rule of thirds is not a rule. Despite its name, it's much more of a guideline, and there are other framing techniques out there. The initial shot of Cobell's car parked on the side of the highway is actually a great example of a different composition technique: triangle composition.
Triangle composition is done by drawing a diagonal line from one upper corner of a frame to the opposite lower corner, and then drawing lines from the other corners that connect to the main line you drew before. This splits a shot into 4 triangular spaces. You can then align something diagonally across one of the lines, fill out one of the triangles with your subject, or use the intersection points as a focus point like with the rule of thirds. The highway shot from Severance uses the upper right intersection point as a focus point onto Cobell's car and lines the highway across the center diagonal line. This creates a fantastic shot that's super pleasing to the eye, and it makes it easy to focus on the important information: Cobell's car.
Another point to mention is that the rule of thirds is not all that's needed to create a good shot.
The side shot of Cobell's car uses negative space to help create the full picture. Not only is the car framed nicely within the rule of thirds, but the emptiness around the car helps really drive the viewer's eye to Cobell and her car.
Sure, using the rule of thirds will certainly help the composition of a scene, but using this rule in combination with leading lines, negative space, color composition, and even the golden ratio can take a shot's composition from good to amazing. The next example I'd like to highlight shows this off well.
Later on in the same episode, Mark and Helly go off to talk to the goat people. They encounter a tunnel and start to crawl through it. In this initial shot, Mark is center frame. He fills the entire center box within the rule of thirds. At a glance, it might seem like this shot isn't using the rule at all, but in reality, it's using it in conjunction with one of the techniques I mentioned before: leading lines. The walls and roof of the tunnel are all converging onto Mark, with the corners acting as direct lines leading toward him. The sides of the wall and the edges of the roof all generally fit around the 4 grid lines as well. This helps drive the viewer to look directly at Mark. If this scene was done without the black corners or framed in a way where the walls didn't converge onto Mark, it would be a lot less pleasing to look at. As the scene moves on, it cuts back and forth between Mark and Helly. Their eyes are typically right along the upper horizontal grid line. Finally, when they leave the tunnel, the black edges around the exit once again frame the pair inside the center box. More importantly though, when Mark exits, he moves his head to the side, right onto the upper right intersection point within the rule of thirds. Then, when he and Helly stand up and start to walk forward, their bodies are generally lined up with both vertical lines until they eventually fully align within the vertical dividing lines.
Not only does the scene show off how other tools can be used to help enhance the rule of thirds, but it also highlights how it's much more of a guideline. You don't have to have every shot's subject be at one of the intersection points. You can keep your subject center frame, but use tools like the leading lines in order to guide the viewer. Or you can just align parts of the subject's body across the dividing lines, like with Helly's eyes or with Helly and Mark's bodies at the very end of the shot. Before we move on to my final example, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. I don't typically make videos like this one, but I'm still trying to figure out my niche, so my content tends to be all over the place, but they're all typically video essays about a piece of media. Why not check out some of my other videos? I'd recommend checking out my video on Jujutsu Kaisen's ending or my character breakdown of Josuke Higashikata from JoJolion, because those videos will give you a better idea of what my content was in the past and what it will likely continue to be in the future. For my final example, I'd like to highlight when Severance breaks the rule of thirds.
Season 2, Episode 8 was controversial to say the least. I honestly enjoyed it, but that was mostly due to the cinematography and tension that it's able to build throughout. Did we need 40 minutes for that reveal? Probably not, but that's also not the point of this video. There are two scenes in this episode that have Cobell frantically searching for something. First, looking for the key to her mom's room, and finally looking for her school notes. Both scenes are surrounded with shots that contain elements of the things we've already covered, but when the camera is showing Cobell digging through the shrine to Kier or through boxes, there's no clear focus. The camera is frequently moving, keeping you from focusing on anything too long. This helps the viewer feel some of the franticness that Cobell is feeling while she looks for her school notes. When the show wants you to focus on something though, the camera movement slows down or stops, and the object of interest is once again in line with the rule of thirds, like with the photograph or with Cobell's yearbook.
If I talked about every example of the rule of thirds in Severance, this video would quite literally be 800 years long. Seriously, rewatch Severance with this rule in mind and you'll notice it everywhere. Once again, there are other framing techniques out there and Severance does use some of them, but I specifically found it interesting at how Severance was able to use the rule of thirds to enhance its cinematography. The rule isn't magic. Other techniques still need to be used and it's much more of a guideline than a rule, but overall, the vast majority of Severance shows off how this technique can help create great film composition. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. See ya.
Don't you worry, it'll be okay. Don't you worry, spit and come, you make my life okay.